much. It's an honor to have you here at the Security Corner, part of the Moldova Security Forum. And thank you very much for your speech during the panel talking about the crisis management and resilience. And I think your experience is quite valuable for all of us. I would like to ask you if you can share some details and information a little bit more about the way you managed the response during the terrorist attacks that happened in Paris, because I think that's a very tragic situation that happened, but there are some lessons learned during the crisis management. And I think that will be interesting for all the audience to hear a little bit more, especially you being the person that led the response.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I was the commander of the rescue operations because I was the general commanding the Paris Fire Brigade, that is a military unit in the French army. And I was deeply involved in the crisis 10 years ago on the 13th of November 2015. So first of all, you have to understand that we anticipated this kind of crisis. Not specifically this one, but I mean anticipating what is happening in the world. So we studied, and I studied personally, 20 years of terrorism before taking the responsibility of my brigade. And the first, idea was to realize that terrorists are doing at their home what they will do in our countries. So they don't invent anything. They are trained for terrorist attacks, a typical one, opening fire with a Kalashnikov or something like that, using bombs. But they are trained for that, and they will implement that in our countries, in our cities. What they are looking for is just for killing massively people, just for using this action as, the possibility to advertise what they have done in their terrorist, environment. So we studied that for 4 years. And was one of the key aspects our outcome was first that in 2004 in Madrid, there was 10 simultaneous attacks killing 200 persons. A year later, in 2005 in London, 4 attacks simultaneously, killing 56 people, I believe. So the question for us in Paris was, if we are confronted to exactly the same kind of situation, that means different attacks roughly at the same moment, but in different places, what we do. And we adapted our strategy so that a specific plan was designed for reacting in case of this kind of attacks. This plan is the red plan at alpha for attacks. So, and the principle of that is to bring the hospital to the victims rather than transporting the victim to the hospital. Just to avoid that, you send massively victims to the hospitals and they don't have the infrastructure, the capacity, the teams to treat people, to take care of them. So, and it was, you need to be very, respectful for the victim and for the families when you have 130% killed. But what I can say is that the fact that the gesture of, all the victims, we send the victims to the hospital where a team were expecting them. This is what we call the regulation. And regulation of victims is a very sensitive aspect of the operation. So the second point is the cooperation with the police. In Paris, as we have been established by Napoleon I 2 centuries ago as a military unit, but since the inception of the brigade, we were under the responsibility of the Préfet de Police of Paris. And that has never changed. So we have 2 centuries of, practice with the police. So, and the cooperation between the police services and the firefighters in Paris is at the top level, I should say. They are colleagues. We work on a daily basis with them. Because also you have to understand that the Paris Fire Brigade realizes 500,000 interventions a year. So 1,400 a day. So it's a very strong implication. And for each of them, almost we have at least one level or another, a cooperation with the police. So this cooperation was very good. And that has been reinforced over the last 10 years, simply because it's one of the key to be efficient on the ground and to save the maximum of lives. Yeah. And the third aspect is the cooperation at international level. I mentioned the example of London and Madrid before, but after the terrorist attack, I invited all my colleagues coming from the head of the fire department of the 28 nations, because at that time we had also a United Kingdom within the European Union, but all were invited in Paris to share the let's say the lessons learned from that. And many of them, because afterwards we had also a terrorist attack in Belgium, in Germany, in Sweden, and almost all the countries in Europe were affected by
yes.
the attacks. And many of them said it was very important for them to exchange the practice between Paris and the rest of the capital city in Europe.
Yeah, I think that's very important to have this communication among other states and to share experience into how to respond better to the crisis and to this kind of emergency situations. And I would like to ask, because this year, we also saw information in the news about the electricity shutdown that happened in Spain and Portugal and also in the south of France, and that really affected people. And we might have this kind of situations in other parts of the world, or even in our regions, because in Moldova, we did have that for a couple of hours that was also provoked by Russia. But how would you say that as at an individual level, we have to be prepared for a similar thing if it might happen?
First of all, whatever the crisis, the first responder are the citizens. So you need to find a solution at your level to react to the immediate period of whatever the cause of that. I mean, if it's a blackout or if it's a car accident, the first minutes, the first hours, you're alone. And that will be always the same. If you have a car accident, you wait for 10 minutes, the arrival of the firefighters. What you can do during those 10 minutes to save lives. It is exactly the same for a blackout.
Yep.
If you're informed that there is a blackout, you don't know how long it will last. So
exactly.
First reaction, do not open the fridge to protect what was frozen in the fridge. So it's first of all a question of education of the population. It's a question of preparation, because we speak about resilience, but the resilience starts at home. If you question yourself, if there is a blackout, what I can do for myself, for my family, and so on. And then you start, because you start preparing what is necessary, having some cash. If you have a credit card and you don't have electricity, you're poor. You have no money. So having some cash at home, having 2 or 3 days of water, potable water, having a bit of food, having, for example, a radio with a battery.
Exactly.
Because if you just use, you could answer, I will use my cell phone. But after maybe 24 hours, your cell phone is useless.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have a comment about that because I happened to be in Spain when the blackout happened, and I saw how valuable were the people that had the radio, because everyone was gathering outside to hear on the news what people are saying, what happened, how long is it going to take. So indeed, there are some things that we do not have them in our house anymore because we're thinking everything should be digital, electronic, our devices and so on. But in case of a situation like that, they are not reliable, just a couple of hours and then you're done. So I think,
if you want to cook and you have only electricity, everything will be cold.
Exactly. Then what are you doing? Then you have to, and you cannot even Google to find out how to find a solution to this.
So the artificial intelligence is very useful, but the natural intelligence is also useful.
Exactly. There are some limitations to that. But how do you think we should, one side is how to learn about that, but also how to make society a little bit more prepared in terms of civil preparedness. Because, for example, sharing the example of Moldova, we do have here institutions that are sharing information, how to respond in case of an earthquake or in case if there is a flood and so on. But I'm not sure if this is reaching the whole of society. I'm not sure if people in the regions or in smaller villages have access to this kind of information. So maybe from your experience, you have some recommendations for all of us, because it's not just about Moldova at the moment. I think this kind of information is valuable for everyone all around the world. Doesn't matter where you are.
Absolutely. I think the strategy starts from the top. And but the response comes from the proximity. So that means also it's a term of communication between the top and the lowest level on the ground. It's a question of education. It is not because you are informed that something very serious could happen that you're worried by that. I spent years in Naples, living at 5 kilometers from the Vesuvio volcano. I was ready for acting. My children were educated to protect themselves. They knew that it was not permitted to protect under the table because the table was with a glass and that could be dangerous for them and so on. So it is a question of strategy at the national level, explaining to the citizen. If you take the example, this morning we had the example of Sweden. In Sweden, they have given a small book explaining with pictures and some sentences what you could prepare at your level and so on. And that must be maintained in the time because it is not just a question of answering now, but maybe it could happen in 10 years from now. So I think it's a question of raising the awareness of the population and explaining what you could do at your level. Mm-hmm. Train people for the first aid, for example. Very few people in the countries are ready to react in case they are injured or somebody of their family is injured. And with only what you have close to you, I mean, a belt, a tie, something like, you can stop an hemorrhage, for example.
And you can save lives.
Exactly.
Or not. Or you can do something wrong if you don't know what you're doing.
Yes, but the law, this point is very important. And I participated in changing the law in my country because I said a citizen cannot be sued because he has done something to try to save a life. Yeah. Because it's very, very important. But you can sue if you don't do anything. Yeah. But even if you're incompetent, but you try to save a life, even if it was not entirely appropriate, at least you're protected by the law. And if you have many countries in the world, it's the contrary.
Exactly. Yes.
So, and I think that's key. So in that case, we will make the citizen as the first responder for its own security and the security of its relatives. Or his relatives or relatives. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for this discussion. I think it's fascinating listening to you and we can talk for hours and hours, but I really hope to have you here next year at Moldova Security Forum, hopefully also this kind of security corner to continue the discussion. But I really appreciate your valuable insights into responding to a crisis. And also today you mentioned very well about how we have to manage chaos. And I think that's quite interesting when you put it in that way. There is a chaos and how do we manage all the moving pieces?
But in terms of chaos, you need to accept that the first minutes, the first hour is chaotic. Yeah. And it's part of the management of the crisis. You accept that if you don't understand what is happening, if you don't know exactly where it is, if you have no precise details on who is involved, how you could take the wrong decision at the moment. So accept that the first hour, nothing is under control. But if people, professionals and citizens have been prepared for reacting through exercises on a regular basis and so on, the first hour, they will do what they have to do on their own. Mm-hmm. And after, let's say, 40 minutes, especially for the terrorist attack in 2015 in Paris, I said that roughly it was chaotic for half an hour. But after 40 minutes, I knew exactly what was attacked, where it was, how many people were injured, except for the Bataclan, because the terrorists were in the theater, and we took 2 hours to neutralize them. But it was the only place among 7 terrorist attacks simultaneously where we were not exactly aware of what was happening within the theater. So accept the chaos and manage the chaos. And the chaos is part of the crisis. And don't fear the chaos. Nobody can give you lessons of, because if you're the boss of that, you need to react appropriately. Yeah. And in the end, you will judge what was the end of the story, not the very beginning of the story.
Yeah, embrace the chaos, but at the same time, be prepared. So preparedness and education. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for having you here.
It was a pleasure.